How's it going, everyone? We are continuing today. Good old GR. Rounding out the weekend. It went from being like in the 20s this past week to being pretty much in the 60s, and it feels great. Before getting into a bit of reading, I wanted to kind of talk about something that's come up while reading this book, which is the idea of being stuck between a rock and a hard place in life. And I think that when most people think of this idea, they think of it as something that they put themselves into. Like when one is stuck between a rock and a hard place, it is per their own doing. I don't think it's often thought of as something that's just kind of a feature of life, which, in my reflection recently, it's kind of seemed to be more just a feature of life. So it's something that I have to learn to work with. The example that came to mind while reading this book of this idea is, if anyone remembers the story about the head of Nickelodeon that came out about his sexual misconduct allegations, there was a good bit of coverage on this, and a number of things came up about how the parents of the child actors that were, kind of creeped on, if you will, there were a number of parents of these child actors and actresses who acknowledged that they basically could tell that there was something weird going on. One, via what their kids were being filmed doing for the TV shows. Like the idea being that there are often innuendos sprinkled throughout programs of TV, especially even in children programs, because children programs are written by adults. And the idea of how it matches the idea is that these parents, regardless of whether or not they knew what was going on or had an inkling, basically they had a gut instinct telling them something's not right about this situation. My child is being offered a lot of money to act in this TV show where the director and the head of the company is coming across as a creep, is coming across as a person who is acting upon their own trauma and inflicting trauma upon others, upon the kids. And these parents illustrated the reason behind why they didn't intervene or say anything being that they did not want to snuff out the potential of their own children as successful actors or actresses. And I can put myself in their shoes and think of myself as one who, if I had a child and my child was presented with an opportunity of this magnitude of acting in a show that has the potential of, blowing up on TV and carving out a societal position of success for them in their future, struggles or not, I would be tempted not to intervene also. And me being the parent, of a child anywhere between the ages of 5 and early to mid-teens know that they can't handle the money until they turn 18. So part of me as a parent would probably be inclined to see it as personal gain as well, regardless of if the money ends up turning over to them in the end. And when I saw some of this footage and read about it, you could hear the confliction in the stories told by the parents. And this is one of those examples where, yes, the parent probably had to condone whether or not the child could act in the show, but everyone likely understands why the parent would say yes, unless the show that they're being requested to act in is one that would specifically, by its description, be traumatic. But these shows were children's cartoons and live action TV shows on Nickelodeon, which was a channel aimed at children. So the whole idea here is that we are members of this society, we're members of this world, we are made of the world and live in the world. People say, I was born into the world. My dude Alan Watts says, I was born out of the world. I am part of it. I am made up of it. So the concept of being trapped between a rock and a hard place is an interesting one, because there are plenty of examples where you can definitely put yourself in that position by choice. But I also think that it's true that sometimes in life, as an individual person, you choose what you think is best, and you potentially acknowledge that there's some drawbacks, and only so much time down the road can you figure out that maybe the drawbacks were far deeper and of greater weight than you could have ever imagined. And I mean, in this specific example, I think greed is tied into it. Greed and fear. Which, this could be a topic for a whole nother video, but if you all are any bit versed in the investing world, there's an index called the Fear/Greed Index, where if you pull up the website, there is a tachometer, basically, which shows whether or not the financial markets are in a place of fear or in a place of greed. A bull market, usually the needle is aimed towards the greed side, and fear is when the markets are dropping, when they're in a bear market. But what I find to be very interesting is that I think that greed and fear are cousins of each other. They're tied together. People are greedy because they fear lack of financial security. I mean, I think it goes farther than that, but generally, when I think of myself, and I think of what I've observed in families and people holding on to material possessions, and people focusing highly upon making it financially. The hardest part is that there's never any, you never get to a point where you know that what you have is going to be enough. It's that bar of success that you set at a certain level, and then once you surpass that bar, the bar has to be raised, because there's room for it to move. There's no ceiling to it, is the point. Um, so this example of being stuck in between a rock and a hard place seems to tie very much so to fear and greed. And these two human characteristics, of which we all experience, are ones that snuff out love. And I guess they're ones that make love challenging. Love is not something that's easy to choose, although oftentimes, at least when we're learning, in my experience, love becomes a choice that you must make because there's no other choice to make. It's either you have the option to either check out of life or choose love when you get to the end of a road. So it's something that also came to mind. I saw this movie called The Brutalist, and I saw it primarily because the actor Adrian Brody is the lead in the movie, and he is an incredible actor. I've seen him in the show Peaky Blinders, and he was an Italian mob boss, and he did an incredible job. I know that he was the lead in a movie called The Pianist, which won some incredible award that he apparently was the only person who at the age of 29 has won this award. The idea is I don't know, I see him as an incredible actor. And the favorite movie that I've seen him in is called Detachment. And in that movie, he's the lead, and he plays a professor a teacher at a high school in a troubled area of New York. I think it's sometime in the 90s. And he struggles between this part of his profession, being a teacher, of wanting to help the children that he's teaching, and realizing that he can only do it to a certain extent because of the influences of their parents, whether or not their parents care, the financial stability of each child's family, whether or not they have family. I highly recommend that movie, Detachment. So that was a really good one. So I decided to go see The Brutalist in the theaters, and it happens to be 3.5 hours long, which is maybe the longest movie I've ever seen in my life. And halfway through the movie, there is an intermission, a 15-minute long intermission, where the screen goes to a still image with a countdown timer of 15 minutes, and you just wait. It's like going to a long concert. And basically, this movie is about a Jewish immigrant who is played by Adrian Brody, who gets separated from his wife and his niece, and he goes to America and meets up with his cousin, who has already immigrated and assimilated into American culture. And I'm not going to have any... I'm going to try to avoid spoilers, but maybe just skip the next 5 minutes or so if you don't want the movie to be spoiled. I'm going to do my best to avoid them, though. So, basically, this guy comes across, he's a talented architect, and he's doing whatever he can to be, one, grateful for the opportunity that he has been granted with, the fact that he's made it, and he's hoping for his wife and his niece to be able to join him. And basically one of the major themes of the movie is that the idea is that he and his wife and niece are attempting to escape war. They're trying to attempt to escape discrimination, violence, hatred. And what comes to be apparent in the movie is that America has values. America is a nation of values where you must be a part of the machine or you fall off and you're alone. It means that you do not survive, and it means that others will not help you to survive because it is a requirement, kind of an unspoken agreement that if you live within a certain society, you must to some extent mold yourself to the values of such society. So I mean, if you look up the summary of this movie, it'll tell you that it was reviewed as a cautionary tale against kind of capitalism in America, specifically. And the weird twist on it is that this immigrant and hopefully his wife and niece try to escape violence and pain and fear. And while they may to an extent end up protected in some sense, there's a potential of them coming to find that it may not be what they expected it to be. And this is another example of what made me think of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. I mean, when you're being discriminated against, when your race is being killed in genocidal acts, what would you do? You run, or you fight. And I think one of the ideas that I'm trying to get to here is that this is a feature of life. And I think the feature of life illustrates the need and the inevitability that people must and will do the best that they can unless they choose to give up. And most people don't just give up. I don't know many people that just end up giving up. So, kind of thinking about that, I don't know. I think that was a good one. I'm probably going to journal about it a bit. It's probably going to be sprinkled into my book somehow. I've got a couple of goals set out for an objective to kind of have a semi-consumable manuscript edition of the book that I'm writing finished by the end of April, probably about the time that my school semester ends. So that's one of the challenges that I'm up against right now. And I'm going to try to continue to do my, to make videos for this account, and I'm going to try to continue to write my poetry, post my poetry. And speaking of it, I will share one or two of the ones that are... I'll share one that I have not posted to Substack yet. You'll get a an early premiere of one of them. I met with a good friend last night for dinner at IHOP, one of my favorite places. They have gluten-free pancakes. They make very good gluten-free pancakes for anyone who requires that or enjoys it. I usually get the breakfast sampler with gluten-free pancakes and chocolate chips in them. They, of course, upcharge for the gluten-free, but welcome to my life. I'm grateful, still. And I shared this one with my buddy who appreciated it. And then he shared a couple really, really cool ones with me. It's awesome to see that he's on the right track. He's listening to God. So this one is called Grasses of Relation. There is this plain where I spend time in solitude, so I may learn to appreciate company when they arrive. And then, something like a finely manicured lawn of Kentucky bluegrass is where I chuckle and wiggle amongst the others who've put in some good training hours. I find myself playing a fiercely competitive game of football in a field of astroturf with those who get off in bringing chaos to the surface. It is not so much the greener aspect which gets me, but the ability to distinguish any differences. I want to stick to the clean and tidy, but I know it is built of work while solo on those vast plains. I celebrate my own company, but am here to share too. Not a lack of appreciation for being on one's own, but nodding to the fun adventures of companionship. What else? This is one that is untitled. I have not yet given it a title. Maybe it will remain untitled. Make that customer feel like a human, not a transaction. From the golden calf of business wafts metallic dust from each and every interaction. The cost of symbolic exclusivity. Why are my friendships, lover relations, reeking of exchange? How could it possibly have played out this way? What have I accepted, embraced? Well, the training, of course, which I have been directed to practice rigorously, yet in all veracity. I can feel the poisons of righteousness past, and I see those 3 times my age still imbibing, stewing in day-aged confusion, wondering why them, instead of considering that which they are choosing. Might it cause just as much pain to stray from the majority in regard to accountability, an invitation of solitude? I begin to think often, yes, but swallow the temptations as cost of feeling less compromised. Do make sure, chap, that your material trade is of equal agreed upon value, and take stock, for this, as you can see, is how we prevent a drastic unbalancing of the scales. Do not be silly and side one's character as contribution to the dinner party. It matters not of what background they are from, for the rules are the rules. I messed up that second to last line. Take it back a bit. It is, do make sure, chap, that your material trade is of equal agreed upon value, and take stock, for this, as you can see, is how we prevent a drastic unbalancing of the scales. Do not be silly and consider one's character as contribution to the dinner party. I think I said side. I crossed it out. It matters not of what background they are from, for the rules are the rules. I actually like that one a lot. I have not gone back and read it yet. Alright. I'll let you think of where that one came from. Maybe I'll share about where it came from eventually. A couple things I've been enjoying over the past week or two. I've been enjoying candid conversation, which is not always easy. It's usually hard. Standing up to friends, standing up for myself, doing this out of love, doing it when I know that it feels right to my core, but it might not feel right exactly in the moment. And I think I've done enough work to learn that a lot of the time doing something that I know is right is hard, because there are plenty of things that are easy to just turn a blind eye to and to avoid. And it's hard for me to admit that I'm guilty of it often. In friendships, in relationships with my family, relationships with those I love in general, relationships with people who I don't know well, people who I recently met. And it seems to be a plague of humanity in general, to say to another what you think that they're going to want to hear, as a method to protect your own image, to protect yourself from your own image, to show what you see as the best of yourself. It doesn't feel good to show another person an ugly side of you. But it's just, it's reality. And I guess what I mean by that is not in a self-serving or, negatively arrogant way of doing something because it's what you want at the expense of others, but actually doing something or saying something because you are considering both the image of yourself that you're creating by how you communicate with another, and you're also considering the potential value that the other may perceive of your directness. At least in my life, directness it's not been very common. And I think that, I can only speak for myself, but I think that if I were to take a guess, it's relatively common for a person to kind of turn around and say, after an interaction with someone who was direct with them, to turn around and say, wow, that person was very blunt, direct, and not necessarily so much even in an insulting way or in a problematic way, but in a way which illustrates that it's rare. So I'd be interested to know if you agree. But, oh man, someone left a dog doo-doo on the beach over there. Oh, sad. the ocean will sweep it away. I don't know, these are fun things to talk about. I personally like it when the dogs are able to be on the beach. They're only able to be on the beach from, I believe, the 1st of October to the end of March, or April. Anyways, this is the week following, or I guess it's the end of the week where it snowed a lot. So I had school off for a couple of days. I did some work, got a lot of reading done, meditation meeting, ACA meeting, AA meetings, all of the good stuff. Integrating myself into a community of people who forwardly want to own their shit, or they're at least at a place where they're attempting to own their shit. Really getting together with groups of people who acknowledge themselves as human beings. I think a lot of societal institutions encourage us to act as if we are beyond human, robotic, devoid of feeling and emotion. And in a place where it's considered weakness to acknowledge fallibility, where it's considered weakness to struggle, when struggling is a reality and it's a part of life, when it's something that we should be here helping each other through. So I'm very grateful. Been focusing on prayer and affirmations recently. One of my favorite 2 words in this life are I am. And the reason that it's one of my favorite 2 words is because when I speak to myself, whether out loud or in my head with my inner dialogue, if I say I am blah, it compounds, and I become what I say that I am. So if I tell myself that I am loving, if I tell myself that I am strong, gentle, understanding, I am forgiving, I am one who values self-respect, I am one who values respect in general, respect of myself and others. This is very important stuff to me.